A little while ago, it's kind of a semi-meeting, kind of a relaxed meeting. And I was listening to people and asking questions. And through that, I heard someone talking about themselves. And ultimately, they were apologizing, not for what they'd done, but more who they were. They were apologizing for their personality. I mean, they were wishing that they were somebody different. It's like, well, that's not you. You're wanting to be someone that you're not. And it broke my heart. And I know that we've all had those moments where we see people and we hear people and we watch how they live and walk through life. And it's like, you're not self-aware. Like you don't understand. You look in the mirror and you see somebody different. You talk about yourself inaccurately. Maybe it's a person that wishes they were more of a leader, more of a type A. They're like, man, I wish I need to try to be like that. And you look at them like, well, why are you trying to be someone you're not? Like you work in and walk in your strengths. Don't try to become something that you aren't. Or maybe it's somebody that is more of a type A personality, and you hear them talk about themselves like, man, I wish I wasn't so abrasive. I wish I was a little bit quieter. I wish I didn't stick my foot in my mouth quite as much. And you have the other person on the other side wishing that they would put in their mouth every once in a while. They're like, man, I wish I would speak up more often for myself. There's this huge spectrum of people that walk through life, and we don't see ourselves for who we actually are. And in that meeting, when I was listening to that person share, and ultimately, my heart was just like, I felt bad for him. I wrote this down. There aren't better personalities. There are more self-aware people. When you recognize who you are, when you start to function with the full version of yourself, how God created you, that is a blessing to those around you. And it's a blessing to you as well. When you see yourself as you aren't, when you start to look in the mirror and you see yourself inaccurately, you are not seeing yourself at all. You're not seeing the gift that you are, that God created you to be. And we unfortunately live in a world. We live in a world where people don't see themselves accurately. There's this, as I was doing some research for this message, there's this man that I found on a TED Talk. His name is Robert Hogue. And fascinating story. I believe he's a journalist. But he was sharing his story, and he said that when he was born with this deformity. It went from like his forehead all the way down to where his nose should be. And I don't say this to be mean, but like I saw pictures, and he looked kind of like a blobfish. Like it's just this huge, massive thing on his face, and his eyes kind of moved to the side a little bit as an infant. And he went through a series of surgery, like not just one or two, but a lot of different surgeries, and pretty in depth. I mean, they removed a chunk of his skull. They pushed it all together again. They ended up, he had some problems with his legs as well. They amputated and removed parts of his legs, and they actually put his two of his toes to make his nose, because he didn't have a nose. I mean, just crazy. And his entire life as he grew up, like from an infant all the way through grade school and junior high, he got used to people telling him who he was. The doctors told him what he was. His parents told him what he was. His siblings, his classmates, strangers. They all had an opinion about him, and most of it wasn't necessarily positive. Their response and reaction to just see him was difficult. At about the age of 14, the doctors came back around. They're like, okay, you're getting closer to adulthood. We would like to do another round of surgeries. Try to get you to look a little bit more normal. Try to get you to look closer to just regular people. And he sat down at the table with his parents, and they told him, they said, Robert, we want you to make this decision. You're 14 years old now. You're almost an adult. This is going to be a choice that you're going to have to make for the rest of your life. The risk, though, there's a 25% chance that he was going to lose his eyesight completely with this round of surgeries. And so they're going back and forth, and he's talking about it, what could be and what should be and how he feels about it. And his brother was sitting at the table, and he'd been quiet the entire time. And finally he speaks up, and this is what his brother told him. What use is it being pretty if he can't even see himself? And that hit him so hard that in that moment he decided to own his face. He decided to own who he was. He wasn't going to let somebody else tell him who he was or what he needed to do. He decided at 14 years old not to have surgery that would make him look more normal according to other people's standards. If you are curious as to what he looks like, this is him today. He has a wife. He's got a family. He's lived owning his own face, owning his own life. And this is something that we try to go into somebody else's narrative and try to adjust ourselves to how people think that we should look or appear or act or behave, how other people see us, and we try to fit into the narrative who they think we should be. Sometimes we try to fit into the box that we want to be, even though that's not accurate to ourselves. And we start to live and make decisions based on inaccurate assumptions. And unfortunately, when we do this, when we are self-unaware, we celebrate the wrong things, we fight against the wrong things, we invest in the wrong things, we find our value in the wrong things. When our identity is misplaced, everything is misplaced. Like there's no common ground, there's no solid ground to work from. And there's an internal impact, how we see ourselves, how we function. You know, the health that we have internally, or maybe the unhealth. As well as the impact that we have externally with those around us. When we live being self-unaware, we might think we're okay, but we are affecting everyone. I mean, this is like the people that show up to the movie theater and they're talking and laughing out loud when they're not supposed to be. Like it's not even a funny part of the movie and they're cracking up and you're like, what are you doing over there? They've got their phone on like full brightness. They're just talking to people around them about nothing in particular. They probably have a bag of chips that they snuck in and they're just crinkling the bag up. You're like, what are you doing? They're completely unaware, right? And in our heads, we think, you're self-unaware. Like you don't understand the impact you're having on other people around you. You know, this is like the people, I'm related to someone that at one point thought this, but people that watch the Olympics and they sit down and they're eating probably a bag of chips again. I don't know why chips is a recurring theme this morning, but they're probably sitting on the couch eating some chips and they're watching the Olympics. These are the best athletes on the face of the planet, and through a stuffed mouth, they're like, I could do that. And then the next event comes up, they're like, totally could do that too. Like these people are just, they're unaware. Because no, you can't. You're on a couch. You haven't trained for that for a second of your life. No, not possible. No, you're self-unaware. Maybe a different level is the person, you know, the young man that likes the girl likes him. But when he thinks about it, he's like, there's not a chance that she would like me. She tries to make it obvious. He misses all of the signals. He sees himself as less than, as unworthy. Like she's so far beyond his reach that she would never go for him. And so he never takes the chance. And misses out on an opportunity for a relationship. That's someone that is self-unaware. They don't see themselves accurately. We all wrestle with this at different spots and different places in our life. There's different things that we are probably too confident in, and other areas that we might be a little bit less confident than we should be. It's this overinflated and deflated tension. It's kind of like a basketball. If you have a basketball and you just pump it up too much, eventually it's going to get deformed. Like there's going to be a weak spot in the ball. It's going to bulge out. When you try to dribble it, it's going to, first of all, it's going to bounce like way too high, and it's going to hit that spot and bounce in a different direction, and it's going to be a problem. You're going to shoot it, and it's going to ricochet off the backboard. You're not going to make it. It's going to be horrible. It's not fun to play with. That's self-inflated or overinflated. You can also try to play with basketball. It's deflated, right? It's not up to the right pressure, and you try to dribble it, and it just stays on the ground. You're like, oh, you can't play that way either. Like neither of those are good. There's the perfect balance of self-awareness and also of a basketball pressure. It's about 8 pounds per square inch. A different, maybe if you're not a basketball player, I got a different illustration for you. Like a dog, there's all different types of dogs, and there's small dogs and there's large dogs. The small dog that weighs 10 pounds but picks a fight with a Great Dane, that's an overinflated self-perception. They're self-unaware. That Great Dane could fit the entire dog in his mouth. Just one bite, and that's it. Or you can have this 90-pound massive dog that's terrified of kittens. Again, that's being self-unaware. Like it's not realizing who you are. We can see aspects of ourselves in both camps from time to time. But over the next 2 weeks, we're going to talk about both of these on the ends of the spectrum. And I get it, as much as we can be part of both at different times, I think overall we kind of had this typical mindset of how we see ourselves. We typically land on one of those two sides. This morning, we're going to take a look at the first group. The group of people that when someone else tries to help give them a little insight, like, hey, you need to know, and they respond with, I am who I say I am. Like, don't tell me who I am. I know who I am. And you're like, I don't think you do. I don't think you have any idea. I don't think you recognize that the way that you see yourself affects you inside as well as those outside of you as well. Here's the problem. We're not always right, even when we think we are. I mean, these are the folks that they look in the mirror and they see Brad Pitt. You're not Brad Pitt. Is that an old reference? I don't know. I still think he's good looking. This overinflated self-awareness is you say things, you believe things about yourself that aren't true. And you behave and you do things that aren't in line with who you are. Your pattern of behavior is off. It's askew. It's not accurate. I mean, these are people that you think you're a good listener, but really you just like to give advice. Like, oh, I'm the best listener ever. You got a problem? Come talk to me. And after 2 minutes, they're like, I got it. Let me give you all the answers. The person's like, I haven't even got into the story yet. Like, I haven't even told you yet. That was just the start. These are the people that regularly start sentences with, I've earned, I deserve, I'm entitled to. Actually, this last one, they probably don't say as much because that one's a bad one. You're not supposed to say that anymore. But this is what we all hear. When they talk, maybe some of you, when you talk, we hear this and we're like, ooh, there's a little bit of an entitlement thing going on. You don't see yourself accurate. You think that you deserve more than what you do deserve. You think higher of yourself than maybe you should. You know, these are the people that right after they get a new job, and they just get hired, they say, I know I've only been here for 3 days, but I'm ready for my raise or that job title, my vacation time that hasn't accrued yet. Yeah, I know I just started, but I have a trip I would like to go on, so let's get going on that PTO. It's not how it works. You're not entitled to that. You don't deserve that. You haven't earned it. Unfortunately, this mentality undermines our relationships. It makes it harder for those people that are in your life. People that care about you, people that love you, and maybe you are the person that loves them. You have to do a lot of cleanup. Like you circle around a lot. You come back around afterwards and you're like, I'm so sorry they said that. That's not, they don't even see it. They don't hear it. That's not what they meant. You have to do that relational cleanup, and it's not even your relationship. You're cleaning up after someone else's relationship. If that's where you are, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say you're probably exhausted. You're probably a little bit tired of that. It also sets us up, if this is you, it also sets you up for failure. Because the moments that you actually do make a mistake, few and far between as they may be in your eyesight, in your perspective, you don't own them. Like the thing goes wrong and you don't own your part. You're like, that's not me. That wasn't my fault. It was somebody else's fault. It was the thing it broke and it's not me. It's not in my hands. You immediately start playing the blame game. You point at everybody else but yourself. And again, what does that do? One, you don't grow in that moment. And two, you make everybody else pay for your mistakes and they don't want to work with you anymore. That's what happens. This type of person also struggles with submitting. They struggle with trusting, even in their relationship with God. These are the folks that they wouldn't say this out loud, but they're more like, hey, God, come and get in the car. I know where we're going. I know where we're headed. You just come along for the ride. I get it. We got plans. We got good ideas. But that submitting thing, that surrendering thing, it's tough. A lot of the time they overpromise, they underperform, and they don't even see it. They think they aced it, and you're like, no, that wasn't great. They only trust themselves when it comes down to it. Paul wrote a tremendous amount of the New Testament. And at one point is the book of Romans. He tells us, don't conform to the pattern of the world. Essentially, hey, don't live your life as if you're unaffected by Jesus, by the gospel, by the truth of who God is. Your life should be different. Don't pattern your life after everybody else's because they haven't experienced what you have, and your life should be different after that. He says the way that we do that is by the renewing of your mind. And then he goes on to tell us and explain to us one of the key components of this transformation and renewal is in Romans chapter 12, verse 3. Key component of transformation and renewal. He says, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought. Like, wait. Transformation and renewal means that I should think of myself higher. No. It says, don't think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment. Unfiltered. Don't give yourself a bump when you think you should. Don't exaggerate the positives aspect. Just look at yourself for how you actually are. Take off the rose-colored glasses. Like, don't try to help yourself out. Don't round off and smooth off the rough edges. Look at yourself for who you actually are. Give yourself an accurate self-evaluation. Jesus, a little bit before Paul says this, he gives this illustration. He makes this story up. It's actually one of the highlights of my childhood was watching McGee and Me. I don't know if anybody else. No? Okay. I was the only sheltered one. That's fine. The episode was called "The Star and the Breaking." I had to go back and look at it just to make sure, and I loved it. But this specific story comes when Jesus is at this dinner party. This is what happens. When he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable. So he comes up with a story. He says, when someone invites you to a wedding feast, which I love how often Jesus uses wedding feasts as illustrations, because Jesus, big fan of weddings, so am I. They're great. Do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. You may see the chair. You may want to be at the head of the table. You know, you're not a groomsman, but you want to be up. Like, I'll just snuggle right up in here over here. I think there's space up there for me. You want it. You're like, I've been such a good friend. I know they didn't invite me, but I deserve it. I should be there. Here's the thing about honor. You can't take honor from someone. It can only be given to you. You can't demand someone give you honor. You can't claim honor. I mean, at best, you're going to get reluctant obedience. This is like someone that says, hey, I want a surprise birthday party. And then they plan it with you. You're like, that's not a surprise party. That's just a party that you knew about. That's all you did. Same is true of honor. You can't demand it. You can't just take honor. If so if you go up and sit in that seat, if so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, give this person your seat. Then, humiliated, you will have to take the least important place. Because you rushed in front of everybody else. You took the seat that didn't belong to you. Eventually, when the host got to you, all of the other seats were taken. Right? And you know where you're going to sit. You're going to sit at the end of the table, next to the bathroom or the kitchen, where you can't even hear the conversation that's going on up front, up top. You're going to be out on the edge. It's cold. It's got a draft. You're going to be uncomfortable. And you're the whole time are going to be frustrated and angry about it. I love that Jesus gives us an illustration 2,000 years ago of someone that is self-unaware, that they see themselves as overinflated. They see higher of themselves than they ought to, because we still struggle with this today. In fact, unfortunately, maybe this is just me being a little pessimistic, but I think if this actually happened today, I think the person that sat in the wrong seat, that then the host came up was like, hey, can you give up your chair? Because it's for that person, not you. I think they'd throw it, like they'd make this big old huge deal. They'd take their chair and just chuck it. They'd make a big scene. They'd blow the whole thing up. They would rather create the storm and just rage for a little bit and storm all the way out of the party than actually being humbled with reality. Jesus continues. But when you are invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, friend, I'm so glad you found your seat. You belong down here. Our relationship is based on me taking advantage of you, and I'm glad you recognize that. That's our fear, right? That's why we want to take that seat of honor, that place that we want, because we don't believe that we're actually going to be given anything. We've been taught that if you want something in life, you have to go out and snatch it and grab it and hold on to it and grab it, whether you deserve it or not. You see something you want, you just go make it happen. We don't think that other people are actually going to honor us this way. Here's a little hint. When Jesus said this, it wasn't just about a wedding. It was something bigger and greater at play. This is actually what he says. Friend, move up to a better place. Then you will be honored in the presence of all the other guests. See, he honors you with your humility. But when you take and try to take honor that's not given to you, you eventually become humiliated and humbled yourself. Someone that is self-aware isn't worried about their seat at the table or position. They're confident regardless. It's like, yeah, I'd rather be up there, but who cares? It's not a big deal. Why? Because I know who I am. And not only do I know who I am, I know, more importantly, whose I am. My foundation, my identity is founded in who I belong to. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. When you try to lift yourself up higher than you deserve, when you try to, reach above and beyond, oftentimes you get humbled. And it's humiliating, and it's frustrating, and you live with the repercussions of that, relationally, internally. But when you come at it from a place of humility, not humiliation, but a place of humility, where you lower yourself, eventually you'll be exalted. Here's our confidence. It's not in another person. It's not that we believe that the host of every party we go to is going to see us for who we are, because we're all broken people. The host of the party that he's speaking about is God. That God is going to see you for who you are and elevate you from your place of humility. The interesting part is pride is absolutely what we're talking about this morning, this overinflated, self-unaware type. Humility is not being the complete opposite side. It's like, well, if there's pride over here, then humility is all the way over here, and that's the deflated person, and I don't want to be a deflated person. You're right, you don't want to be a deflated person. Humility is actually the middle. It's the balance in between the two. It is the balance of self-awareness. And our self-awareness is how we see ourselves. It is our identity, where it's founded. Often, just a little bit of insight, if you're wrestling and struggling yourself or with someone you know that has this kind of bent in them, oftentimes what has happened is in their past, someone told them and devalued them from a piece and a place that was really important to them. Like they probably have a story, whether they might have even blocked it out, they don't even remember it. But there's a story, there's a moment in their life where someone devalued them and they made a conscious decision from that point forward, I'm never going to allow someone else define me again. I'm never going to allow someone talk down to me again. So I'm going to take every opportunity. I'm going to grab every single thing I want. I'm going to try to take every single piece of honor that I want, that I think that I deserve, because I will not be humiliated like that again. I'm not going to be told that I'm less than. So there's usually give people grace, right? There's usually a little bit of background in all of this. And with that insight, a lot of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time, these folks that wrestle with this, it's actually from a place of insecurity, not a place of projected confidence like they show you. When we follow Jesus, we are submitting to him. You can't follow someone and not submit. This is the whole thing. You can't follow Jesus. Literally, think about it like on a trail. If Jesus is up front, you can't from the back be like, turn left here. It's not your place. You're following him. You're just stepping in his steps. But that's how you follow someone. You're not dictating the steps. They are. You're just following in suit. And following Jesus looks like something. It looks like sacrifice. It looks like turning the other cheek. It looks like giving someone the shirt off your back, walking the extra mile, loving the people that do not love you, your enemies, those that persecute you, you pray for. It's doing the things that doesn't feel good because of the justice piece that we have. No, they deserve something different. But this is what grace is. And honestly, you've been extended grace, and thereby you can extend it to other people as well. Because of whose you are. When you submit, you recognize that you've been purchased. You've been redeemed. Like, well, purchased, that's kind of a weird thing to say. Because of the sacrifice that Jesus made for you. He paid the price. Here's the thing about becoming self-aware. It keeps you from being entitled. It helps develop healthy, life-giving relationships. It moves you toward curiosity and growth. And here's the big one. It helps establish your identity as redeemed, as loved, as forgiven, as a son or a daughter of God, co-heirs with Christ. That we've been adopted. That we've been purchased. You're like, well, these are really good thoughts. Feel good about it. How do we do this practically speaking? Like what do I do now? I've got some thoughts. First one, evaluate yourself and own your thoughts. No longer do you just get to let your mind run wherever it wants to. You have to own your thoughts. You have to evaluate yourself. Ask yourself, how do I see myself? And why? Why do I see myself that way? I think I've mentioned before, I've been on this kind of multi-year journey of trying to develop a healthy rhythm in my life. And part of that, what I've recognized is in that there's space I have to create to have thoughts, to just think. I have to get away from technology and the world and everything else and just get off the grid for a little while. Because when I'm busy, when I'm in the middle of my schedule, when I'm running back and forth and picking my son up and trying to get work done and doing all the things and going to every single meeting I have and trying to remember what I just forgot, when I'm in that spot, I might have a good thought every once in a while, but I rarely ever am able to figure it out and follow it all the way to the completion of the thought. Like I have ideas and then they end at that first sentence. But when given enough space, when I'm able to actually think, I can evaluate myself differently. I can see myself more accurately for who I am, how I'm treating those people around me, where my values are, maybe how my behavior isn't in line with some of those values, and I need to adjust that. So that's part one, self-evaluation. Part two, ask for feedback from others. And then listen. It's not enough just to ask for feedback. Because I could ask for feedback, and the entire time, I'm just defending myself. The entire time I'm like, this guy's an idiot. Why did I even ask him? Doesn't see me. Okay, go back. That wasn't worth it. Like, I get it. We have this defense mechanism within us. If you ask someone for hard feedback and they give it to you, someone that you trust, someone that you know cares about you, that you care about them, they don't want to give you difficult feedback. That's uncomfortable. It's not fun. Meaning you should trust it. Because they don't want to give it any more than you want to hear it. And yet, it might be more accurate to the truth than how you see yourself. There's this leadership guru, Simon Sinek. You might be familiar with him. He's given this talk before to large companies, and he actually uses this practice within his own company. They do often, on a regular basis, peer reviews. And it's very simple in how they conduct it. You are surrounded with a group of people, not a large group of people, but with a group of people. And you have, ahead of time, you've come up with 3 areas of growth, the most important 3 areas for you to grow in over the next year. And then also your 3 strengths. And you get into that room, and everybody else has done the same thing. And you share your first 3 areas that are most important for you to grow in the next year. Essentially 3 areas that you've been struggling, 3 areas that you see a need to develop. And then after you share yours, you close your mouth and you listen. And you go around the room and everybody else shares 3 things that they believe are the most important for you to grow in the next year. That's hard. Because they're people that you trust, they're people you care about, and they're saying difficult things about you. And then you share the 3 strengths that you have, where you feel like you're knocking it out of the park. And then you let everybody else go around the room and share those 3 things, how they see you. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard. But what happens is your lists get longer. They get lengthened. Your perspective on how you see yourself expands. Your self-awareness in that moment grows. Now, I get it. We probably don't all have that set up. It's kind of weird to invite your friends okay, we're going to do this thing. Come on over for lunch today. Here's an easier start. Ask this question to someone that you trust. What's it like on the other side of me? We're pretty good with what is on our side, but ask someone that you trust. What's it like on the other side of me? I actually first heard Jeff Henderson. He's a pastor, friend, and leader from Atlanta. And I heard him say this, and I thought that is such a profound question. Because we don't ask for other people's perspectives on us. But this is, how do you experience me from the other side? The other side of the desk, the other side of the conversation, the other side of tension. What's it like on the other side of me? And then lastly, so that's first self-evaluate, second, ask for feedback, and then third, you guessed it, ask God to show you how he sees you. If you didn't guess it, you need to come to church more often. We're going to talk about God. Okay. Ask God to show you how he sees you. Right? This is part of prayer is not just asking God to do things in us and for us. Part of it is asking him questions and then listening and waiting for a response. But part of following Jesus is actually reading your Bible. Why? Because God can actually use those scriptures to speak to you, to show you, to reflect back to you who you are. That when you start to listen to other voices, and especially when you start to listen to God's voice in your life, it will move you in the direction towards humility rather than being humbled and humiliated. Remember, humility is the balance that self-awareness provides. That you're not way on one side or way on the other. You're balanced. Humility does some incredible things in our life. It allows us to surrender. Without humility, you're not going to surrender. You've tried it. I've tried it. It doesn't work. It allows you to be more grateful, to experience gratitude on a different level. When you see yourself more accurately, right, in the balance of who you are, you're able to see other people more accurately. You're able to see what God has done for you. And without even trying, it's just a natural, normal thing. When you see yourself for who you are and you see other people more accurately, you're going to be more grateful. Gratitude is going to be natural. And not only gratitude, but generosity as well. Because you're not seeing yourself as too big to fill up the room. You see other people and the needs that they have. And you're not so focused on your own stuff that you have to get, that you deserve to get. You start to see other people's stories and listen to them. You start to see other people not how you see them, but how God sees them. As other children, as other sons and daughters of his that have also been purchased and redeemed by him and offered grace and mercy. It allows you to be more generous with those around you. We think that we know ourselves the best. We just know ourselves different. We might have resting angry face. It's like the church version of that. And be totally happy on the inside, but everybody else is perceiving us one way that we're not. Could be the opposite. We put on the mask. We pretend to be happy all the time, but inside, we're destroyed. When we wrestle that way, with how we see ourselves, with how we're feeling inside, when those two, the perception of other people as well as ourselves, when they're off, when we don't recognize how God sees us, when it's off, all of life feels off. But when those things start to line up, when we start to see ourselves accurately, there's no more posturing. There's no more projecting. Here's the amazing part. All, not just some, all of your interactions in life get better the more self-aware you are. Every single one of them improves. Not only are we more self-aware of who we are more aware of who God is in our life. That he stood in our place. There's a Bible college term, propitiation of our sins. This is where he recognized that the wages of sin that we've all experienced is death. That's what we deserved. And Jesus stood in our place and took that on himself so we didn't have to pay that. And all we have to do is accept him. All we have to do is accept the forgiveness that he extends to us. And hopefully, throughout that process, we start to see ourselves more accurately. Let me pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for everything that you do for us. God, we thank you We thank you for how you created us. I pray that we would stop trying to be someone that we're not, that we would recognize the gift of who we are, that we are a gift to others around us, that we can even be a gift to ourselves. But it's because of what you've done, how you created us, how you've redeemed us, what you've done on our behalf. It is not about us, it is about you. And when we see ourselves as you see us, God, life gets better. It gets brighter. It gets more joyful. Not necessarily easier, but it does get better. And God, I pray that this morning you would give us the courage and the boldness and the strength to take those steps, to becoming more self-aware and also aware of you. God, we are so grateful for everything you've done. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.